Hello. I'm going to tell you guys to go on YouTube because it's probably a whole lot easier.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Rajan, hi, Anna, hi, Marcelo. And hi to all the attendees that are quickly piling up to our webinar. I'm so happy to be here. This is the first of our series of webinars, which we've decided to undertake in these moments of lockdown, which is now has many side effects besides getting fatter, definitely, or turning us into bakers. I have to admit, I tried 2 times to bake bread, and my bread is this high, so I gave up. I am using indeed. So another thing, I'm going to try another hobby. So we've all become very creative, and especially we are. I think that we all are more available to reflect upon very important things that are at stake at the moment, especially in the tourism sector. I am Alessandra Priante. I am the director for the region Europe at UNWTO, United Nations World Tourism Organization. As I said, very proud to be here. This is the first of a series of webinars that we called Vadis Tourism. I took the quote directly from our fantastic director of communication, Marcelo Risi, who was going to be moderating and humanizing this important conversation. Quo vadis tourism, quo vadis in Latin means where are we going? And so this is what we want to do. We want to touch upon some of the crucial thematics that are arising at the moment when a lockdown is forcing all of our countries at different measures, stakes, impacts to confront something that we would have probably not thought it would happen to us. So we are going to start focusing on what is probably the most delicate thing, especially in an industry like tourism, which is communication. And communication, it's actually how you communicate crisis itself. How do you communicate within crisis, in crisis, after crisis? We've seen some examples. Let's say the politicians were very kind to us because they gave us a little bit of case studies that we can reflect upon in the recent days. You know, did they do the right move, the wrong move? Does that have an impact in the industry? And how big is that impact? And how do we actually react to that? Especially in an industry that is so dynamically based on images, on you know, activation or creativity. As I said before, without any further ado, I am going to let you know how this webinar is going to work. our fantastic Marcelo Rizzi will be conducting this important conversation. Him himself is a very experienced journalist and anchor before joining us, and has served in many other positions. And we're really very proud to have him with us. He's trying to guide us into a strategy of communication that makes sense. And he's joined today, and thank you very much. We're very grateful for your time, by Rajan Datar, who many of you might know. He's an award-winning broadcaster and journalist. He's from the BBC. Hello, Rajan.
Hello, how are you?
Hi, how's London?
London it's nice weather outside. It's very empty, and we are all trying our best to keep going.
Okay, great to know. Great to know, and we're all ready for the next phase. And beautiful Ana Nance. Ana Nance is not only an acclaimed international photographer, but she's also a person who has reflected upon, and in fact, she's also a creative consultant for YED and for other institutions. She's reflected upon the importance of photography, especially in the field of communication. And she has focused, correct me if I'm wrong, Ana, also I believe out of your own passion, on the conservation sector. So it will be very interesting to know from your end, from your experience, to learn, how we're going to, interact with these future challenges, also leveraging the image potential. So, and Ana, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. It's my honor. Pleasure.
You're in Spain though, right?
Yes, I'm actually in the country, which coincides with the conservation part. I have a home about 3.5 hours south of Madrid, in Sierra del Segura, a very isolated place. I think we made a good decision to come here. From what we're seeing,
definitely. Well, we're us in the city. We're all very jealous of you, because I'm sure you can go out and take a walk.
Well, we started in the beginning doing that, but we've actually kept ourselves into our own garden for the past 10 days.
And started baking bread as well.
Yeah, but pizza. I'm doing better on my pizza dough from Jamie Oliver, I have to say.
Oh, wow, that's fantastic. So without any further ado, Marcelo, I'm going to mute myself. Please, all participants, feel free to write your questions. There's also, we had a full house in registration, over 500 registered. So everybody was following on YouTube. You can also comment on YouTube. I'll make sure that one of my team members is there to try to capture your questions. And the way we're going to work is Marcelo, Ana, and Rajan are going to be in conversation for at least the next 40 to 45 minutes. And then we will be joined by 3 special guests. I'm not revealing anything. You have to stay with us, logged until that time. And after that, we're very, very pleased to open the floor to all your questions, which I will try to summarize and understand which are the ones that are, more contributing to the conversation at the moment. So thank you very much. And to you, Marcelo.
Yay, super.
Thank you, Alessandra, for the welcome. Thank you, Ana, and thank you, Rajan, for joining us in this, the first edition of many, many more to come, I hope. And of course, thanks for all those who make the time to participate. I think the participants, and I include myself, we had to listen. This is one of the premises that we're trying to push when we communicate from the World Tourism Organization. Listen first, talk afterwards. Talk is cheap, especially in this uncharted territory that we're trying to move ahead. So I want to see what really journalists, communications experts, like the 2 that we have the pleasure of joining us in this webinar today, what they see from the outside, how we've been doing these things, how the media and the travel media has been dealing also with this new situation for everybody. So really, the first question is really straightforward, and it's ladies first. It's to Ana, but it's the same, of course. It's a conversation among the 3 of us for the broader audience. Is how have you seen the travel media really dealing with this? Because as we know, tourism and travel has been in the headlines for sad reasons over the past weeks. It is the hardest hit sector. and it's for many it's getting more and more dramatic because it's the businesses, of course, the whole sector. But now, as we know from a United Nations perspective, it's the economic ripple effects having social impact and being a threat to sustainable development. So this is the whole picture.
Yeah.
So how has the travel media really dealt with it? Anna, what's your take on this?
Okay. I think that it's broad. In the very beginning, the media obviously went to the majority of them, I would say, directly to measures, health measures, what to do, giving a lot of information on the virus in general, how to protect yourself if you do have to travel, your different health measures. And of course, once I think that was established, which I think I have to say that there has been a really healthy collaboration with the travel media in that sense. Everyone has gone human very quickly. This is the first time, of course, we all know that the world has seen something like this. So I think that every sector has been taken by surprise. And I think that the overall reaction, and not only travel media, but whatever kind of media, they've all reacted in that way. With that said, there are very interesting stories now that are starting to come out. Just this morning, I saw, where the New York Times Travel revisited their 52 places to visit, which is their, list that every travel journalist looks to, and they've done that via internet. Or I have a very close friend, journalist who works for Condé Nast Traveler, and she wrote a beautiful story about the sounds of Iwathu, a blind producer who records sounds. And the story is basically, let's stop and let's listen. Let's stop and listen to what the world is telling us. What is nature telling us? National Geographic has also been producing some very interesting articles. Obviously, Jane Goodall and documentaries that are coming out. Jane Goodall's The Hope. There's been even very interesting things like in Vietnam with the rice ATMs that I saw this morning. That's on Travel and Leisure. So as we go on, I think we'll start to see micro stories and different types of stories, but they will more than likely continue to revolve around us being at home, like a podcast or a virtual tour, museum tour. But we may actually become surprised on the type of stories that will continue to come out.
But I think, you're addressing like two different baskets. One is, of course, it's a bit of the nostalgia. Oh, the places we used to go, how do we perceive the world in a different way? I think we can get to that a bit later, because of course, tourism has come to a standstill. So what's the tourism story to tell? But this is a question further down the line, I think, to both of you. So, but your main assessment is that the travel media has reacted in a responsible and solidary way. Has the travel media been up to the challenge of being solidary and spreading relevant information as we initiated this? This is your.
I think in general, yes. There are always the cases of people not being politically correct in these kind of circumstances, and I think that might come a little more from the PR agencies in the beginning, continuing to promote a country when no one can travel tomorrow. But I think that after a couple of weeks, the criticism is very fast and very available. Through our quarantine, we're all on social media and on the internet. So quickly they have sort of corrected themselves. That's my overall opinion. And I do think all in all, they're doing a pretty good job in terms of primarily informing the public with news type of stories and, the measures, as I said before, to take, if you need to get a refund from an airline because something has been canceled, or if it's, again, how to, wash your hands, or, where to get a mask if you need it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Now, that's the thing. Now over to you, Rajan, because many of us watch the BBC Travel Show, which you have been fronting over the past weeks, and we all know you as a producer, as a presenter, and an avid traveler. So actually, you're confronted with a task to doing a travel show, a weekly, without being able to travel. And so you have to find a way. How is the BBC going about it, Rajan? You as a journalist, how do you cover tourism when you can't travel?
Well, can I say, first of all, this is a sad and bewildering time for all of us. Travel, for many people, is perhaps something they're lucky to do, and obviously the main priority is health. So when you look at the BBC as a whole, health was the main issue. Now, I can't speak for the BBC as a whole. It's a huge organisation. There's news outlets, all that stuff. The travel show, when we realised what was going on and we had to react, obviously what you can't do is show presenters. We may have just filmed it off somewhere nice and interesting around the world. It would just be wrong. It would be inappropriate. So we knew that. And then the first response was, okay, what do our viewers want? Now, our viewers are travellers, they're consumers. Their first worries were, yes, refunds. How do I get my refunds? They were really worried about that. Then there were people who are stranded. You've got to think about them. What do we do? What do we do about that? Obviously, then we use a lot of Zoom stuff in order to talk to correspondents, people who are presenters, but placed all around the world. We will talk to them. You're right, there is this issue of how do you make a travel program when you can't travel? And then that's the next step for us. So kind of step 2, if you like, is then to look at areas, sectors in travel that may be of interest to people generally. So for example, in last week's episode, we looked at animal sanctuaries. We looked at animal sanctuaries and the effect on them. And we looked at a donkey sanctuary in particular. I think you might have a clip of this actually, Marcelo. I don't know if you can play that, but
we have a couple of clips. I don't know if our producers on the other side of wherever they are of their screen can just shoot the clip that we prepared with Rajan. Thank you.
We may or we may not do.
Oh, no, we do. Tiana, we need your help.
Where was the donkey sanctuary?
I'm on it. Just a second, please.
In Morocco. In Morocco.
Oh, where in Morocco?
I didn't actually go to it, but it's in I think it's the north of the country, and it's run by 2 ex-human rights lawyers, I think.
Interesting.
Now this isn't it, I don't think. But if you like, play this, because really what we're showing here is the immediate response, the consumer response, if you like, to the whole thing. And we're playing it without sound.
Sorry, I think this is the wrong one. It's the other one, I'm afraid. This comes later. Sorry for interrupting that.
What are while they get it together, what are some of the other stories that
This is the one. This is the one. Thank you. This is the one.
But I guess we need sound, Marcelo. This is what I love about these connections. For how much we rehearse them, they're so imperfect, which always brings everything back to where we are. We're at home, so we're supposed to be imperfect. So Tiana, can you kindly restart that with some sound, please?
Or I can happily talk over this and explain what's going on. These are people who are stranded at various airports around the world. And this is obviously our first response. You know, how do we get people home from, a lot of Brits were stuck in Peru, for example. How do we get people home from Peru? And we managed to get people to film themselves talking about this. So this is footage of that. It doesn't matter if you haven't got the sound for the time being, but that was that. And then, as I said, step 2 after this is to look at the issue of interesting places that the audience generally would still be okay watching. So as I said, animal sanctuaries, where it's a kind of empathy there between about how did these places survive. And they've got no tourists coming, the number of volunteers has gone down, there are issues with food supplies and all that. So we looked at, here's the lady from the donkey sanctuary, and we talked, and she's basically describing the fact that she obviously she now has to almost start again when it comes to income. But what happened interestingly after this report was that apparently the number of donations coming into that donkey refuge in Morocco rocketed. so there was, you know, we are seeing this generally around the world when it comes to all sorts of things, that people are really keen to contribute in some way. And something like this is seen as a valuable, good thing to contribute to. So that's how that particular film works. And maybe we should start the film because we're just basically me talking over people talking. But you get the idea. The next stage, however, is what we do after this. And I think what we're going to try and do is show films that aren't actually necessarily touristy, if you like. They're much more looking at the culture and the lifestyle and the history of a country. So there's a two-parter about the north of India, both the northwest of India, Gujarat, and then the northeast of India that's coming up. We've also just played, I think, a program about Tony Giles, who's a blind backpacker going to, I think it was the Middle East and Jerusalem that he went to. He's done several trips for us. But again, the experience of someone like that, who's seeing the world in a different way. So in other words, these are programs that could stand on their own as good documentaries or as good TV programs, from either be it travel or not. I think we've got to be very, very sensitive here, because there is nothing worse, I think, right now than seeing somebody enjoying themselves in a 5-star resort or whatever. Not that we show that, but you know what I mean, or just going around the world. You don't want to see that. So you just got to be very careful. That's been our response to the travel crisis at the moment. But it is very much, you know, this is a first step here. We're talking about health, hygiene, security. These are the things that people are thinking about. We will talk, I think, later on about perhaps the positive response that the travel industry can make in terms of PR, in terms of how they communicate with their customers, and in terms of how we can then take the story onwards. And I'll talk about that a bit later.
Thank you, Rajan. Thanks for the video as well. You did a good voiceover. That's okay. I think people understood what it's about, and it goes back to people telling their own story. Now, at UNWTO, we get confronted every day with the key questions, and unfortunately, we do not have a crystal ball. Nobody has it. But now I'm in the position to ask you guys for maybe really to dare go out on a limb and see what's really coming next, because you just mentioned PR, how countries will promote themselves. And I know we're in this transition whereby, of course, the world will change. We don't know what will come out of it at the end. We know that tourism will come back. We know it from past experience, and it's out there. And it makes sense on all sorts of levels, which we won't get into now. And I know that we have a huge, of course, tourism professional followership watching this, and they're going to watch the recording and really the takeaways. What would your take be? And I go back to Anna for the first part of the reply on really how should destinations promote themselves in the post-COVID times, knowing that COVID is going to stay with us. We will have to learn to deal with it. I mean, we mentioned health, security, generating trust. So how can we communicate further down the line?
Yes, I think this is very important, and probably for a lot of the participants. You know, they're now struggling to figure out their way and which is the right path. I definitely think that confidence is going to be very important. I think that the travelers are going to look to the governments and institutions and whatnot to give them the confidence that it's okay to travel. Therefore, I suspect that domestic travel is going to be much more on the rise in the immediate future. Well, immediate future, that's very, we don't know that exactly, but I think that after the domestic travel, the international travel will eventually come back. But I think that what people will look for will number one be safety, as Rajan was saying before, and health, of course, and they need that confidence. I was reading this morning where Emirates, for instance, they're the first airline that will give blood tests for passengers. And I was also reading that flight attendants will probably have to, I would imagine that the Federation Airlines will probably have them go through some medical training. And I think that those type of messages may be very interesting to use in communication. There's an instance, I think, or a case where, for instance, Taiwan masks this past week. And I'm sure that they weren't thinking of how do we promote ourselves right now. And they, like everyone else, is trying to deal with the crisis firsthand. But I think that, you know, through their good efforts, this is probably a very natural way of promoting themselves and doing these type of things that everyone should be doing. Maybe ways that will, you know, attract travelers in the future, thinking, hey, look, you know, they did good and they must be good people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that these are messages that we'll be seeing in the future for communication, and that will have good, you know, positive effects.
Rajan, knowing the BBC's editorial focus on, of course, humanizing, pushing the human angle to convey a larger, bigger picture, do you feel we're really at a time of reckoning, taking stock, because this pandemic is forcing us to stay at home? And might tourism communications also change in that regard? Like that we shifting certain values, as you know, as a UN agency, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is really our blueprint, our operating blueprint. And we know, and we've seen it, we have so many examples from across the world, that tourism is an active partner of advancing the sustainable development goals. Is this a time? Can this benefit this situation? Can the narrative around tourism benefit from this moment of taking stock, or is this too idealistic for us? And what might destinations do with this?
Let's just deal with the human angle first. And yes, human stories work. And I have been going around the world quite frequently, talking to PRs about this, that you've got to focus on people, real people who perhaps work in your destination or are part of your your team. These are your ambassadors. These are the people that you should be perhaps focusing on, and maybe doing little videos that will then send to their email base, their client base. That always works, because then you're talking human to human. And in terms of stories, we do not want an endless kind of litany of statistics that are really bad news. Talk all the time about, you know, the different measures that are taking, how long they're taking to go, and the death rates and all that stuff. So you've got to somehow break that up. You've got to get some sort of light into that. Now, a story that's big in the UK at the moment, that it's not a travel story, but it's a kind of example of the stories that everyone loves, is this 99-year-old guy, pensioner, who's basically walking laps around the garden, his back garden. I think he fought in the Second World War, but he's like, you know, he started off, he wanted to raise £1,000. He's ended up raising £17 million. Now, an equivalent of that in the travel world will do amazing wonders. It will be gold for TV broadcasters, be a great story. It'll humanize it, everyone loves it. And I think the main point here is that if you're for a travel company, don't do hard sell. This is not the time for hard sell. What it is the time for is building relationships.
Have you seen, sorry for interrupting you, have you seen examples of attempts for hard sell just going on, maybe in disguise, or? Well,
worse than that. I mean, I'm still getting PR emails coming through saying, you know, this new resort is opening in 2020, summer 2020. Come and do this. It's like, what the hell are you doing? Are you in a different world? You've got to switch off your automatic press release button for a start off. It's tasteless. We're not going to do that stuff. Plus, we know it's not going to happen anyway. So yes, I have seen bits of that. I mean, I think the other issue when it comes to bigger agencies, when it comes to the likes of UNWTO or, you know, countries, whatever, is be careful of mixed messages. As Anna said, consumers need clarity. What they really want to know okay, fine, I'm interested in coming to your country one day in the future, but you've got to tell me that it's really safe. Every step of the way is going to be really safe. And so therefore that's interesting about, having blood tests on the plane. I mean, it goes from that. It goes from if I book a holiday, I want to know, number one, am I getting that money? Am I that money safe? Number two, can I get from my house to the airport safely? It's bizarre, but you might think that. When I get into the airport, am I going to be healthy? Is it hygienic? Perhaps everyone should have it's been suggested we should all have global health passports. I think, you never know. App on your phone, something that makes you reassured that you're getting on a plane full of people who are clean, if you like, who are not going to.
Okay.
So that process goes on.
Yeah.
Anna mentioned just the
Biometrics.
that domestic tourism might be the one to come back first, maybe out of a very human security instinct. This is what you know. This is the environment that you're familiar with, and of course, the further away you are, the more surprising it gets. Because and there's an irony here, because one of the strong assets that we know that tourism has, it's a certain degree of surprise, right? Of unpredictability, which is one of the true muscles of people moving around the world. But so you see a gradual growth from domestic to international as we came to us. Would that be like a curve that you anticipate from a consumer perspective? And this would be something that tourism communications, PR professionals, and so on should be aware of?
Well, I think it makes sense, because yes, you're right, domestic tourism will be the first port of call for a lot of particularly Western countries. I love this idea of slow travel, by the way, that you discover something more slowly, you enjoy nature. We're all enjoying nature a lot more, let's face it, and that is something that we can work on. If we're talking about, if you like, a Keynesian approach to boosting the economy, then your domestic travel is one great way of doing that. I mean, there are lots of sites in the UK, and I've been wanting to make a program about this for ages, which need help and effort, and they need a community around it, and they can actually now use this time to revitalize local sites, local destinations, and help people in a country rediscover their own country. Now, I know people have talked about this for a while, about domestic tourism, but this is a classic situation for this. So by doing that, not only would you invest in domestic tourism, but ultimately, of course, international tourism. So the places that look a little bit run down because there's been so much footfall, maybe you've got this time now to do something about it, to make it look good, to take it into the 21st century, or do something that makes it more relevant to the millennial traveler, or whatever. Its time is now, and you can do that now. So I would suggest that would be a good way forward.
Anna, talking about this,
yeah,
of course, not all countries, not all destinations have maybe the infrastructure, the purchasing power, even depending on the level of economic advancement and so on, really to
infrastructure,
count on, to rely on domestic tourism as a locomotive. We have the classical case, of course, of the so-called SIDS, the small island developing states, who are classical countries where a huge chunk of their GDP depends on international tourism. But not even those. My own country, Uruguay, one of the main, if not the biggest sole economic sector is international tourism as a provider of foreign exchange. We have many other countries in that same situation. What we would be worried about, what I'm worried about when I listen to this, of course, is maybe a tendency to somehow an isolationist solution, which might cut off what, again, tourism stands for, which is going beyond borders, going beyond walls, and we're far off better off by really working together than flying solo, aren't we? Anna, what do you think?
Yes. I'm still a little stuck also about what Rajan was saying. And I think that this, in parallel with what you're asking, brings up two very interesting questions. How to promote local domestic travel. Because all of a sudden, there are businesses And there are large companies that need to very quickly respond. And their big question probably right now is, how do we respond, and how do we promote this domestic travel all of a sudden? And this brings up my second question or comment would be those challenges that come along with all of that, right? As you're saying, Marcelo. A lot of places may not be prepared for something like that. The infrastructure is not there. You know, the roads are not good. The transportation is not possible. And of course, with our new world situation of the crisis, health and hygiene, again, may not be coinciding for this domestic travel. We don't know that yet. And the risks of someone going to a small town and taking the virus, and then all of a sudden this small town gets infected. I mean, these are very important issues. And I think that, and in this sense, I have to say that the UNWTO is doing a great job in throwing out these questions and giving this type of advice to everyone out there listening. And these are the things that we really need to stop and think and go over and have some options and solutions for everyone out there in terms of all of this.
So what would be your headline now? We have about 10 minutes to go before our special guests arrive. I'm watching the time, Alessandra, don't worry.
Oh, good.
But really, your headline and one bullet point for a destination, a tourism communications professional, who of course is faced with the challenge of, how do I position this? How can I be ready for the day after? And what do I say? What can they do?
Okay.
Show me your crystal ball.
I think the main point here is, and I mentioned this earlier, is this is a long haul. This is not about immediate results. You've got to build a relationship with those people. Now, hopefully you've got some sort of sense of community, or if you haven't built one, with people that you know have come to your country or like your country or might be interested in your country. So work on that. Work on, as I said, ambassadors, people who are everyday people who are doing everyday stuff, and somehow building a communication there between somebody perhaps who's a taxi driver in your destination, or who is working in the market or something, who's obviously not doing anything now, but I bet they're real characters, and I bet they could talk directly through a vlog or whatever to your potential customers and humanize it, because what people don't want to necessarily see right now is, as I said, hard sell. Don't go for that. Don't talk about that. The other thing is, you mentioned idealism, and yes, this is a time to be idealistic, and it won't go unnoticed that global emissions have gone, in terms of carbon emissions have
come down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now this, there's lots of upsides. There's lots of upsides to this. Obviously, it's tragic what's happening in terms of the death rate and in terms of infection rate. But is this a time to look at this and think, is this going to be perhaps, have we perhaps now finished that period, that heyday of exploding travel where everybody was going everywhere? And yes, we had over tourism. Don't forget, we had over tourism. It was a big issue. It may come back. That's the cynical side of me. Is in a year's time, maybe 2 years' time, are we going to get back to exactly the same as we were before? Or are we going to rethink, reset, and decide, okay, from now on, we're going to do this in perhaps a bit more conscientious, more responsible way? And part of that, I think, is creating interaction between, again, your host country or destination, particularly in the developing world, and you as travelers. Have a sense of kinship, have a sense of working together, rather than it just being me, a customer, buying your stuff and then leaving. That all those things can change. It's a good time.
I was reading some of the questions coming in from people. It's very interesting, actually. And they're talking about this domestic travel and how do we approach the fear factor, and how do we approach the economic factor. And so there's a lot of very interesting questions and issues coming up. To go back a little bit on, as you asked before, Marcelo, and as you were speaking, Rajan, about promoting your country and whatnot, I'd like to mention something I saw this morning that was shared was Greece. And they have a campaign called Greeks at Home. And this is, for instance, they've responded quickly and they've done something quite interesting. I know that there are a lot of businesses on Greek islands. I happen to have a family that has a hotel on an island in Greece. and they're very concerned that they may have zero occupancy this summer because 90% of their clientele is international. And so their big question is, what do we do? They're scrambling, and that is an answer, direct answer. You know, they are looking at and probably need to look at getting now Greek clientele. And a lot of these islands in the past haven't had that type of business. But the big question is, how do they do that, right? I can see from these questions coming in that is a direct concern from a lot of people as well. I know that there are a lot of questions or comments thrown out easily, like in terms of bringing prices down. But this is a big problem also, because it's not so easy to bring a price down when you have an infrastructure, you know, and you can't pay your bills. So these are a lot more technical type of questions and solutions that need a lot of research and whatnot. But again, these are the concerns of people, and these are our immediate situations that are going on right now.
Marcelo, sorry, I'm just stepping in. Thank you so much, because I know that you've been trying to keep it for the time, and that's the British of you that does that. You know, when I first met Marcelo, I spoke Italian fluently, because Marcelo speaks fluent Italian. Then I heard him speaking German fluently, and then he speaks English with a British accent. So it's always difficult to try to identify. I think he's a mix of all these personalities, right? Now, I want to, Anna, yes, I've been seeing, we have a flood of questions. I also have my team following up on YouTube, where we have a lot of people connected. I just want to make one technical remark. I want to apologize to all the attendees that registered and that apparently are having some, there's a troubleshooting in getting in. We're very sorry about it. We don't have no idea what it is. It might be your browser.
You've had great response, great response.
Yes.
A lot of people have been trying to get in. That's probably why.
Yeah, no, that's probably it, because we were full. That's also using the opportunity of our YouTube channel. I just want to apologize to all of you that felt disappointed. In any case, feel free to put your questions on YouTube. I have my team going through it and copying and pasting everything. I mean, this is why sometimes you see me with my head down on my phone. So I'll go through that and I'll try to identify. I've seen a lot of them coming in, but basically I wanted to start engaging, if you allow me, Mr. Risi. I would like to engage our special guest that decided to join us. Please.
Yes, just 1 minute before, and this is now the German in me speaking, because yes, I have this, I juggle with multiple personalities, but they're under control, they're under control. What I take away from this first round, and thank you for the insight, of course, and of course it works into the other phase. It's, of course, we're talking from coverage, from journalistic communications response, and how we really transmit what's to come, and maybe how we will talk about tourism in another way. So my key points, takeaways so far is, of course, the human angle. So the tourist as the ambassador par excellence. So there's nothing like your personal story. So the global value of a local story, and the humanizing angle, and how you can relate to it from a personal perspective. Trust is of the essence. Yesterday we had the third virtual meeting of the Global Tourism Crisis Committee that UNWTO leads with our Secretary General. And trust and building confidence was like a little mantra over the discussion, both from a consumer perspective, but also if we look at investors and how do we prepare for the future. Of course, this goes hand in hand with political action beyond lip service, because everybody acknowledges the importance and the relevance of tourism, but we need also to action to follow up. And this is really the talking point that we are pushing from the World Tourism Organization with increased strength, especially when we have the big donor agencies, the so-called Bretton Woods institutions, the IMF, the World Bank meeting this week virtually as well, the European Commission making decisions, national governments, that tourism, and we know it because it's so cross-cutting, can also be part of the solution beyond tourism itself. No hard sell, as was mentioned. It's not the time for that. really, again, in talking of going beyond words, when we talk about development, sustainability, idealism, that it's not just a marketing headline, but we really need to walk that talk while we build, of course, as Rajan pointed out, longer lasting relationships. And I think that tourism as the people-to-people industry par excellence again has the biggest muscle in conveying that message. We have, of course, all the statistics and the numbers going up and down, but it's only numbers in the end. It comes down to personal relationships, and this is the true muscle of the sector. And I think Anna wanted just to say something before we
I'm seeing a lot of repetitive questions with the same question. When is the right time to promote? When can we start promoting again? You know, I'm seeing that through maybe 4 or 5 different questions all of a sudden. So I get a feeling that people are quite anxious to know, you know, when would be the correct time to start promoting your destination again?
Okay, I think we can leave that question
Okay.
in the back of our heads for you and Rajan as we listen to our guests, and I will pass on again the virtual floor to Alessandra, and
Thank you very
maybe
much.
we come up with some sort of reply.
Super.
Thank you very much, Marcelo. Yeah, I think, Anna, that's a very interesting question. And actually, I wanted also to build up on something that you said in the beginning, Marcelo. You said, how do you become a tourist when you can't travel? And I would like to put forward this question to a fantastic person. And he's the chairman of the Turismo de Portugal, and a dear friend, Luis Arujo, who's connected with us from Lisbon, I guess. I don't want to hear if he's in Madeira. I'm just not going to connect him because I'm going to be tremendously jealous. So I've unmuted Luis, and I'm allowing him to Luis, can you hear us?
Yes. Hi, Alessandra.
Perfect. Hi. So
can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you start your video, Luis? Can we also see you?
Here I am.
There you go.
Hello. Hi, Luis. So are you in Madeira or in Lisbon?
No, I'm very close to Lisbon with a very sunny day, beautiful weather. So I know I shouldn't say this, but I think the weather is coming. The weather is coming.
I know it is. So Luis, you heard our conversations. So I think those questions are great for you, really. How do you become a tourist when you can't travel? When do you start promoting? I mean, what is Portugal doing?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Alessandra. Very nice seeing you after all these messages during all this time, and very nice meeting you all here. Well, I've been hearing what you were saying. I have to add another word to trust, which is data. And we're very worried with that right now. I mean, we understand trust is crucial for consumers, for the industry, for the banking system, for everyone. But right now, and I just left from a meeting regarding this, the thing we need most is data. We need exact and very accurate information about each airline, how they're planning the future, what their plans ahead, if they're leaving some aircrafts on land, or if they're planning on opening to the skies the day we decide, or our governments decide to open our countries. So this is the most crucial moment right now for us. We've been collecting all the information we get. We've been doing the first weeks here in Portugal were to give some oxygen to the companies and to the workers. So that was our biggest priority. That together with the locals, we thought that being tourism such a force for good, especially here in Portugal, we've grown so much during the past 4 years that we needed to return something to the locals and to the population. So we've been engaged in a lot of solidarity campaigns and activities, but now it's the time to plan for the future. We've decided to look ahead and started planning for the future. And planning, as I said, starts from data and starts from listening to people. And what we've been doing is trying to understand our markets and giving a lot of information to the companies here in Portugal. I can't count on how many webinars or conversations we've been engaged for the past week. We've been engaging all our 25 delegations with our companies here, because this is the time to open books. This is the time to freely speak of what's happening. It's not a matter of competition between Portugal and Spain or Portugal and any other country. It's a matter of together finding the solutions. That's why we always say that the more information we get and the more freely we open them, the quicker we'll return to the activity. So that's our biggest concern. In terms of promotion, we're not doing any campaign right now, but we're launching a movement today, precisely today, which is we're not going to call ourselves Visit Portugal. We're going to call ourselves during 2 weeks, Read Portugal. So we will be promoting.
Wait, Luis.
You said read?
You're going to be called to Read Portugal?
Yes.
Wow.
Read.
So,
wow, interesting.
We're going to stimulate everyone to start reading about our country.
Interesting.
Based on the Portuguese authors, of course. We're doing this campaign.
Fabulous.
It's gonna be live today, and we have extremely important authors that speak beautifully about our country, about our sea, the sceneries, our gastronomy. So we've decided to put them all together and started promoting them. So this is the time to read about our country, and maybe one day in the future, a very short future, we will start, or hopefully everyone in the world will wonder what this country is and want to come here very soon. So this is the kind of things we're doing, engaging with our visitors, the ones who were here once, but most important, trying to give them a little bit of trust and reassuring that no matter what will happen, we will always be here. That has been our motto for the past 4 years. It will be for the future. And our biggest target is giving the best experience, but most important, reassuring that we will be here, respecting differences and respecting everyone wherever they come, and offering the same thing that they will always find in our country.
Oh, interesting.
Thank you very much, Luis. This is, I mean, Portugal is always a source of surprise, I guess, for all of us, and definitely one of the most active countries, not only in region Europe, but in UNWTO as a whole, right, Marcelo?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And for us, it's a geographic privilege to living in Spain, to having Portugal as a neighbor who who also always inspires how to manage things in a very good way. No, I'm very encouraged, but what we just heard, of course, it goes back, Luis, as you see, it's again trust, it's transparency. I like the Read Portugal, which marries very well with Read Portugal so you can travel tomorrow, which is our campaign, as you know, that we've been pushing, and I think it goes along into that same direction. We're also trying to collect, speaking of the human angle, asking our users and followers, how will travel tomorrow? What are they thinking? Because we might have many very intelligent, of course, proposals, policy actions, recovery plans, and so on. But what does the consumer actually want and listen? It depends absolutely on data, which is a very tricky issue at the moment. And I'm also very encouraged to corroborate that listening is so important, as Reese just mentioned, and as I said at the beginning of this webinar. Listen first, get all the data literally, and then you start crafting the way ahead. Thank you.
Actually, you also mentioned, Luis also mentioned gastronomy, and it's interesting because we just launched a few days ago a call for all our member states to actually submit us their signature dish, the making of their signature dish, and collecting beautiful pictures and gastronomy recipes. I know that, I mean, I said it before in the beginning of the webinar, like, interestingly enough, we're all turning to be like wannabe chefs, or, you know, gastronomy is definitely, but I would like to corroborate this, because for a few surveys that were done just before, let's say, the explosion of this, they were noticing how much gastronomy was recognized by travelers all over the world for being one of the core representatives, let's say core elements that would actually influence the choice for the destination. So for just being an added plus, it would actually become a motivation. And we somehow believe, and I'm also seeing from some of the comments that we're receiving, that could be one of the things that we can leverage for the future. Anna, the questions are flocking. I'm so happy. I just have a technical message before passing on to our other honored guest, which is that maybe any of you found problems entering after registration. Our technical department is saying maybe in the email when you do your registration, you should look into the bottom and it says join the webinar in progress and click on that. Or maybe it's just troubleshooting derivating from the fact if you're using Explorer, Chrome, I don't know. I mean, I don't know this. I've tried baking, it doesn't work. I know I do not want to become an informatic person. Honestly, Luis, something very interesting. Read Portugal. Just a few days ago, when the Italian government said we're reopening activities, they said one of the activities we're going to reopen is the libraries and places where, places where you go and buy books. And everybody's reaction was, what? So interesting. We're just having a disalignment between a good initiative in one country and another one in another, but it's okay. Maybe we can have received some Portuguese books and start reading them and, dream of our next time when we travel to Portugal.
Well, to tell you the truth, it also has a lot to do with the how transversal our activity is. And this happened because we saw some news here in Portugal as the booking system and the libraries were one of the first activities to lose sales. So we thought, well, maybe it's an opportunity to help them start selling again and thinking about the country. So it has been a challenge because we're not in the same level. We're much more focused on promoting a country. We have to explain that it's not enough just a small sentence talking about the country, but even that is interesting. We've been growing up and building up on top of that, so it's very interesting.
And I presume the next step for you would be listen to Portugal in terms of music, in terms of conversation, even language. That could be a next phase for you, couldn't it?
Yes, definitely. Well, we're already thinking about the Spotify playlist for Portugal, but that's a different story. At least for now, we're having the books being sold and beautiful videos. I will send the videos when this finish, because it's really beautiful and the beautiful sentences. And in the end, they don't only speak about Portugal; they speak about everyone, and they speak about ourselves. And we've been becoming so emotional these past few weeks that we need this kind of information and this kind of support. So I think it's really interesting.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Luis. Rajan, I just saw you popping up there, and I want to get back to you. Now, going beyond this, and of course we have many countries. We cater for 160 countries across the world, and of course the also tourism sector. And I think many of us can get inspiration from these ideas. Now, you listen to a proposition like this, Read Tomorrow or Travel Tomorrow, as we're promoting, Stay Home Today, Go Back, etc., etc. I mean, all the hashtags that are floating around. But Rajan, in 1 minute, one radio minute, you're a radio man, I know. So let's look at the clock. What is this a news story for you, and how would you go about it? What's the criteria, your editorial criteria, to make this a newsworthy story? I'm thinking again, of course, of our webinar, which is about communications in these circumstances, because, of course, on the one hand, we have the push communication from, of course, promotion, institutions, destinations, and so on. But, of course, the resonating chamber might be or not, of course, news coverage, which makes sense, of course, then again, for whoever reads, listens, and watches. So what's your editorial criteria? What's the hurdle they need to pass, and how would you go about this story? Thank you.
Well, I think you have to think about it almost indirectly. So it's, as I said before, it can't just be this country is getting ready for tourism to come back, or they've rebuilt something. It's not about that. It's about something that's quirky, something that's counterintuitive, maybe about a country. Because if you're going to hear about Spanish wine or something, or you see, we're not going to do a piece about Spanish wine because everyone knows about Spanish wine. Tell me something different about Spain.
It's great. Spanish wine is great.
Even now, better now.
But what I'm saying is, come up with something that maybe something that goes viral. I mean, I think the way that quite often now that news works is if something is going viral online or on the internet, then it tends to be a story, a human story that everyone's picking up on around the world. I mean, the other thing that we've got now is this unique situation where the whole world is more united, if you like, in terms of what it's looking at, more focused together than probably ever before in history. You have got the world's attention, in a sense. It is a massive opportunity. More people are watching television, more people listen to radio. So that's actually a very good thing. And more things are going viral. Now, what can really push a country, and as I say indirectly, is not here's a great resort or here's a great place, but these people from this country are doing this. It's interesting. Or there's been a movement. I mean, I'm sure, for example, the NHS story, which is huge in this country, but I think it's universal, where health workers are, for example, being applauded for everything they're doing. And I think if you can somehow connect travel with the health workers, if you just think a little bit more obliquely and a little bit outside the box, you're going to come up with stories that basically tell the viewer or the listener, oh, this is something about this country I didn't really think about. And it plants a seed in their head, which gives them even more reason to want to go.
Okay, now this is the producer's guidelines. Anna, you're a visual person. So what would literally your angle be regarding this? Because also thinking of the day after and how tourism communications and promotion will change. I'm sure also that like the typical touristy images we might also change really the angle, the focus, the distance, and so on, the filters. As a photographer, and stick to 1 minute, please. How would you, where do you position your camera, your lens?
Well, I'm going to show you where I wouldn't position it. This is my time for my screen takeover. Since I did prepare a photograph. Did I do a screen takeover already? Let's see if I do this right. Did I do that right? Let me do full screen now.
Yes.
That's one, right? You can see that. Okay, good. I'll just show this for 1 second and then I'll go back. This is a photograph taken in Iceland at the Blue Lagoon outside of Reykjavik, yes? So obviously this would not be the type of image in the future because of social distancing, which I think this is going to be a very big issue in the future, yeah? And I'm sure a very big challenge for most of institutions and governments on how to, and companies and businesses, et cetera, on how to address this issue. And how would I focus, or where would I focus my camera? That brings up a whole other issue that we haven't spoken much about that I think is important to mention, which is nature, sustainability. And there are a lot of countries and destinations that survive off and with nature. A lot of travelers travel to experience nature, and I think that in the future they will probably do that more. I personally, as a photographer, have been enjoying these type of assignments that I've been getting more and more in the last few years. I was in Costa Rica when the state of alarm in Spain was activated, and I arrived the day after, and I was actually on assignment in Costa Rica, working on a very interesting assignment for El País, which is for their Sunday magazine, it's the largest newspaper here in Spain. And we were working on a story which will be published in a couple of weeks on how their green is gold, and how a country like Costa Rica has gotten to where they are in travel. They've been very successful. At the same time, successful in terms of a business of travel, but they've also been very successful in preserving their nature, their flora and fauna, and very successful at conservation. So personally, as a photographer, those are the things that I'm now interested in. And I think as I move forward, those are the issues, visual issues that I will also be interested in.
Can you give us back the screen?
Oh, really? I'm sorry.
I think you're still.
Are you
I think
sure
you're still.
kind of like the Blue Lagoon, even though I
Nope,
would
how do I do that?
like the screen
Stop
now.
share. I'm so sorry. That whole
That's it.
time I had the photograph of the
It's
Blue
okay.
Lagoon
So
on.
just for
Boy, you
the
guys saw
transition,
enough of
because
that, didn't you? Sorry.
because I know I know we have another guest, and we want to give everybody the opportunity to speak. So I'm
Well, I
two
hope I
takeaways
answered that
from this
question.
and going back to again the focus of this webinar on communications. I like the indirect approach by Rajan. So not in your face, but really how do I approach get in an indirect how am I led, and how do I walk the reader, the receiver of my communications through something she and he can relate to. And I also like the approach of Anna. So what maybe based on the past, what not to do anymore, and just to rethink everything. Thank you, Alessandra. We have another guest, I understand.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. And we've been patiently waiting for her turn. I'm very happy that we are here. We have here with us Ms. Anat Shihor Aronson. She's the spokesperson of the Israeli Ministry of Tourism. And hello, Anat. Wait, are you unmuted? Is Anat with us? I'm asking the technical. Anat. I think we can unmute her.
I'm sorry I wasn't here from the beginning.
Anat, fantastic. Oh, so good to see you. Hello, shalom.
Hello.
Shalom, shalom. Hi from Israel.
Oh, hello, Anat. Thank you for
Always have a nice weather, so you know this is not a questions with us. But so first, I'd like to thank you for having me and just indicate some
You're
little
welcome.
things. A few years ago, I was invited by the UNWTO to a wonderful seminar in Spain about how to communicate a crisis. In those days, there were only countries from Africa, Asia, Middle East, and all that. And nowadays, as we can see, it's everybody in. And it brings me to one of the biggest tips I got from the seminar is transparency and sharing. You know, we cope with this situation and we do everything we can to have transparency to our people, to the public, and also sharing. One of the things we do is that all the spokes just every other day. We have Zoom meetings all the time, and we have a unity in the messages. And we also go out to the people, you know, we are allowed to go out and speak to the industry, to the heads of the industry, and we listen to them. We let them give us advices what to do, because they are the professionals, they are in the field, they know what to do. Unfortunately, we have experience with such situations, not as big as this one, but we had the crisis before. So this is one of the things we learned, is to listen to the people, not only broadcast to them, also have a dialogue, you know, it's in us and them. And what we do, we try to be a lot on the communication. We try to give interviews to show the people that we are there for them all the time. But I have to tell you that it's a challenge, because the communication, the media now is busy with a much more serious, not like that, real serious things. You know, people are sick, people are dead, and to find some spots for tourism, it's pretty hard these days, unless you have something essential to say. So we are facing that, and we are communicating very intensively through our Facebook page. We put virtual tours, a lot of virtual tours everywhere in Israel for in Israel tourism and also abroad. You know, we have a lot of webinars going on around the world with our managers, which are spread around the world. And they do seminars and webinars all the time. We continue marketing like that, you know. It's not a hard sale, as you said, but we still work on our image and make people curious about our country. And you know, I'll give you a little view of something inside Israel. There is now, Israel is talking now about the strategy of going out of the situation. And we are wondering and trying to push tourism in the line. You know, there is a line of industries going out of the situation. And we are somewhere in the middle towards the end of the line. And we are trying to explain the importance of this industry and the contribution to the spirit of the people, to the economy of the country. And I think we're doing a good job in that because we are pushing all the time more and more forward, and we, I think, succeed in that. So I think this is what I started with was the sharing and transparency. And this is why I'm so happy about this webinar, because sharing with you and listening to ideas from you and see what's going on in other countries, it's very important to us. And I'm happy to say that I see a lot of similarity in things which we are doing and you are doing. And I will love to have and see more of this in the very near future, especially in this situation. So I'd like to thank you very much for this webinar. And
thank you, Anat. Thank you so much for bringing over all this important experience. I mean, Israel is for us, as you can imagine, for many of us as well, a benchmark when it comes also to safety and in this case also health measures, because you know, it's very interesting. I asked Marcelo's permission to actually engage with you immediately onto something because it came to me. Also reading all the questions that are coming through. It's interesting because it is very much about, you know, humanity and the human touch and being in close contact, as also Louis was saying, with the companies, with the business side to reassure them together with the general tourists. Now, the interesting thing, and I'm seeing many of the questions are also focusing on that, is that there's, let's say there is a sort of mantra, which we don't need to even talk about, is that before travel, international travel really resumes with all the possible controls and health measures in place, then we have to focus on domestic. So when you're saying you're also reaching out to your international tourists, what are you telling them?
We're telling them we are waiting for them, and everything is waiting for them. We miss them very much, and we try to wake them with some games and competitions, and of course special videos that we did for this time. You know, we prepared for this time, and we're working now on more. And we're working, of course, on the web. You know, the digital marketing became the king. You know, we used to split between digital and, you know, online and other ways. And now, of course, we are online all the time. This is our doing. And we are in touch with them. They are very happy, you know, also with the agents, not only with the general public. We are there for the agents, and we are working on the day after. We all the time talking about the day after. We give them a light in the end of the tunnel, and we're working on helping them financially, you know, and giving them incentives in the future, in the near future, when they start marketing again. So we are preparing the day after.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much.
And you know, I just would like to say one more thing. You know, this came to us. This came to us when we were in all times breaking the record of tourists incoming to Israel. You know, we had close to 5 million tourists coming a year to Israel, which for us, it was a very good time, a couple of years. So it caught us in the middle of the all-time record. So in the beginning, you know, we didn't know what to do, but we very quickly got to marketing on an online and being optimistic, giving optimism to everybody around the world. And I think this is the right way to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anat. Now, please, everybody, if you can stay with me, including you and Louis, for this last 15 minutes. As I promised, I wanted to give also space to questions coming from the audience. Again, the questions are incredibly diverse. So I would just, you know, can blame me for that. I would just handpick and cherry pick the few that are probably leading to an answer from our esteemed panelists. But rest assured that we're all going to try to get back to you, because all of this is recorded. The Zoom is recorded, so we're all going to answer. I just personally want to return back to some of the practical questions, pragmatic question, obviously from countries where the disruption of business is probably mostly heard. So talking about the measures that the governments are implementing, talking to the chains of hotels, the OTAs, to convince them to put the percentages of their commissions down, all these, you know, very direct questions. UNWTO is not able, guys, I'm so sorry, we're not WHO. We have no enforcement over governments. The only thing we can do is recommend, analyze, recommend, and do what all of our esteemed panelists are saying. So being close to your governments as much as we can and try to guide them and reassure them on the importance of tourism. But we cannot go beyond that. We cannot convince them on how much they should give you back, or talk specifically to your hotel industry to convince them to, you know, to have greater credit from the banks. Nevertheless, it's very important that we know what the issues are, because bear in mind that maybe what you think is only happening in your country could be happening in many other countries. And on this, I would like to build upon a few of the questions that came across. But before that, allow me to share with you a very interesting remark that came from Rebecca. And I'm not going to say last name out of, I don't want to name people to that level, but that it was interesting. Marcelo, Rebecca was advising for travel to be promoted as a humanitarian endeavor. You know, that's interesting, you know, that, you know, travel is about
Humanitarian aid endeavor.
Aid endeavor, yes, because at the end of the day is like, okay, we're going to be promoted to an agency that brings relief directly into countries. Why not? Let's put it forward to Guterres. Maybe he listens to that. It's definitely all about recognizing the importance of our industry, in not only in our lives and not only related to our leisure side of life or leisure activity. It is an essence of us. It is an essence of us being travelers, being explorers, desiring to see other places and to engage with other people. So there's an interesting gap there that we need to follow. Now, to go back to some of the questions which were shared with me, there's one that of course touches us as agency a bit closer, which is the one on sustainability. A lot of people are saying that, you know, we resume, how do we make tourism destinations more sustainable? Because definitely this is seen, as many especially of the people from the industry, as an extra burden. What do we have to do? Do we really have to put those plexiglass boxes? Do we really have to, you know, what can we do besides that? So interesting. How do you think sustainable tourism, I mean, I don't know who of you wants to answer on this.
What's the question exactly? How do we think sustainable tourism
will be implemented? Because people are saying if we have to implement also sustainable tourism together with health measures and you know, safety safety technicalities that we need to implement in our own destinations, how are we also going to deal with sustainable tourism, or how can sustainable tourism actually be a leverage in this moment?
If I will, I raised my hand fast.
Yes.
But let's keep it really,
this
let's
is-
stick to time. Anna, sorry,
Okay.
stick to time.
1 second.
1 minute, and
Good.
then
Okay,
the
great,
moderator will
great.
cut you.
Super.
Okay,
That's probably better anyways. I think this is super important, and obviously from my conservation interest, et cetera. I think that this has given us a time to reflect and to think. Luis was talking about that, you know, and I think that it's really important that we speak freely and that we use intellectually all of our experiences to put forward. With that said, I think that the solidarity and the unification of correcting some of our mistakes in the industry is super important as an industry. And, you know, there are questions even of how do we keep these carbon emissions down in the future, because we all know that this has been very, it has been very real. With that said, low impact travel, how do we achieve that low impact travel, even if it is mass tourism? Because that there are a lot of businesses that deal with it, like the cruise ships. You know, we will support these businesses, but support them. Thank you. I've got 10 seconds left. Low impact tourism. And I think that we have to really think about nature and really think about in the future, how can we make less waste? Because otherwise we'll have no oceans to travel to. We'll have no nature to see. Good. Sorry.
Thank you, Anna.
Done.
Luis, Anna, would you
Yes.
have an opinion on this as well?
Do I have to raise my hand? Yes.
Yeah.
I think it was already, I'll try to stick with the minute and give some examples. It was already part of the agenda for long, at least for some countries, at least for Portugal. It will be much more. It will be a demand from the consumer. So what we have to do is try to give them what they need and what they want. So for instance, we're thinking of ways of commuting inside the country. We were only focused on airplanes mostly, or airplanes mostly. Trains are our biggest focus now. Cars, bicycles. So this is the focus. We're changing the classification of stars in Portugal to address this. So you can't be a 5-star hotel if you don't have concerns in terms of what plastic you use or how much water you waste. So this has to be, it comes from the customer, but it has to be for the government and the companies to address these issues. So I think a lot will change. We've become much more frugal, or much more demanding with certain things. And for sure, these things will stay with us for a very, very long time.
Well,
Thank
before
you.
passing on to Anata, I have to say this is something, yes, Rajan, I'll return to you. Like, many of the comments are actually going into this direction. Homero, Marina, and many others are saying things will never be the same again. So maybe definitely agreeing that using an old campaign or just reviving what was done in the past is not particularly useful. Please, Rajan.
What I was going to say was just to inject a note of realism here. Don't forget, we'll have had a period of maybe up to a year and a half of 2 years of no tourism to certain places. There is going to be a natural inclination to get as many people in as possible back to your resort. That's just sheer economics. You want to somehow replenish the lost money that you've had. So, you know, I'm worried that yes, those idealistic things may happen, but when you come to cities like Venice or other places which are used to huge numbers of tourists, the desire is going to be, actually, we want them back because we need to somehow get our bank balances up again. And this is just as much small companies as it is large companies. So we're going to be
Anat, do you think this is what's going to happen in Israel? People are just going to want the numbers, they want the 5 million back, or are you also looking into sustainable practices to change things forever?
Yeah, we just had a webinar about this. And we had some experts saying, and I agree with them, that we'll have a change in the...
Oh no. Oh no, Anat's connection.
I think the attractions, now you can hear me? Yeah, okay.
now we
I
can
think
hear
the
Anat, but we
tourist
lost you.
attraction.
I think Anat is having some issues with the connection from Israel. You see, this is a downfall of being in a beautiful sunny garden. Beautiful.
I'm a, yeah.
Anat, hello?
I'm here. Do you hear me? Do you see me? Yes, now you can see me and hear me again.
Let's try
Yes.
again because we can hear your answer.
Yes, do you hear me? Do you see me? I can hear you, I can see you. I'm fine? Okay. So I'm saying that we just had a webinar about this subject, and we think that
No, the net is not allowing
the main will widen. I'm sorry?
No, Anat, we cannot hear you. The moment that you start telling us the solution, somehow
You
the
hear me?
internet doesn't want us to hear it. So I would recommend. I'm so sorry about this. Must be some problems with the connection. So why don't you
now you can hear me?
write us? Why don't
Can
you
you hear me
write
now?
our panelists here, and I'll make sure that I'll read your comment to everyone before we disconnect. Sorry to ask you that, but it's the best way, maybe. All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Now, before quickly, thank you, Anat.
Okay, I will write.
Before quickly passing the final words to fantastic Marcelo Risi, Wonder Marcelo, as we call him, I would just like to pick up with other very interesting comments coming from the audience, especially the one on YouTube, and thank you everyone for attending. We'll promise that next time we'll give you better information on how to make sure that you activate your registration, because apparently the bottom was like very low and we don't do Zoom. So anyways, so what is interesting, first of all, many people connecting from everywhere in the world. Marcelo, we have Mauritius, we have India, we have Pakistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Hungary, we have everyone. So it's really cool, right? That everyone's listening to this. There's a lot of questions also regarding the possibility of leveraging, for example, mineral waters. So how do we resume medical tourism and spa, another product that could be interesting. A lot of them are actually joining the reflections of Louis, especially about, and of Anat as well, especially about doing things differently, you know, transportation. Louis, next year, 2021 is the year of the European railways. So it's the year of the train for Europe, for the European Union. So let's just hope that the European Commission hears us a little bit better. So, and then a very interesting comment coming from Chiro, referring to when Anna said that after our approach to the crisis went human very quickly. And so the question is, do you think we will manage to maintain this human factor in the future when we reapproach tourism? So I think what's interesting is that many of the people are now concerned, if you taking from all the interrogatives that are being put forward to us, they're thinking, okay, the now, but then what's next? Because majority of us think things are not going to be the same, but I don't know how much do we know of the extent of that change. So I think we will probably need to work a little bit harder in bridging that gap ourselves, even though we're probably in the same pot, to bridge the gap and just try to continue exchanging information. Probably the best way is what you guys are already doing, being close to people and getting as much information. People are saying as well, commenting here, they're saying share, no more competition. Data, yes, but no more competition between countries. Just share data the max that you can. So I think, I mean, there's many more of you. As said, we're all going to get back to you. We're always there for you. Please write to us. And now I will pass it on to my esteemed colleague to do the wrap up.
Thank you, Alessandra.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Alessandra. Thank you to Anna. Thank you to Luis for also participating. Thank you for all the participants. And thank you, of course, to Rajan and Anna. You'll be seeing and hearing more of them in the future. I take the opportunity also really to give you the participants really and the viewers through YouTube the opportunity also to share with us and really to join in this campaign. It's online. It's called How Will You Travel Tomorrow, which is our tagline, as you know, in these times. It's a brief video. Share with us your view on how you want to travel tomorrow, no matter how idealistic. I mean, this is what we need to listen to. Going back to one of the connecting threads throughout this webinar. Anat said something very important before when she said, of course, people are struggling now how to cope with the immediate effects of the pandemic. It's for many tragically a matter of life and death. But at the same time, and as we know, and Rajan spoke of John Maynard Keynes at the beginning, our economists, for us economists at least, who also spoken always about the long term. But as we know, the long term starts today. So we definitely need to prepare today for when we phase out and we start seeing how and when we can promote and position us again. So listen, how to travel tomorrow. The data is important in terms of how we are assessing the situation. This is all of what we're doing from UNWTO and trying to give the best possible advice on various policies, fiscal, monetary, employment, regulations, and so on. I think there's a false trade-off between sustainability and recovery. It's again about values. Humor, the population at large is demanding it, so it's sustainability is not an add-on at the end. It has to be cross-cutting, just as tourism itself, and not by backpacking. You're sustainable, and if you're not backpacking, you're not. We have resorts who are sustainable in energy management, waste, local value chains, and so on. So I think this is a bit of a false dichotomy here. My main 3 points to wrap this up, if I may, are: 1, make it human. Use real people. The real people are the true ambassadors, because we are the people-to-people sector, and we aim to benefit from the people. 2, make it meaningful. And of course, I'm referring to communications again. Make it human, make it meaningful. So what's the real values that you want to transmit, and the intrinsic value that we know that tourism has. And this is part of our Travel Tomorrow campaign. We don't go to segments of tourism, but what lies underneath, and make it solid, true data, as far as we can get them. And I think these 3 elements can produce the main output that we've also been, the main value, that we've been looking for here, which is through listening first, having this in mind, generating trust by consumers, by the tourists who will come back, and exert the transparency that's needed to reestablish confidence, also from the investor side, and so on. And all of this, of course, will only assist us as we are raising our voice, and I hope you follow us in all our external communications and the statements by the Secretary General when we're making an urgent call for action to the donor agencies, to investment and development banks, and to governments, because all of this is only one half of this equation. The other half, of course, needs a strong support and real commitment beyond nice words of those who have the power to do so. So thank you very much. And I think this is only the beginning of a larger conversation, and I hope we will meet again, not only virtually, but also in the real.
I'd like to say thank you. It's been an honor.
Thank you very much, Marcelo. Thank you, Anna, Rajan. Thank you, Anat, Luis. It has been fantastic. Obviously, like all good things, we have to come to an end. And I would like to thank the patience and collaboration of our fantastic technical team. And special thanks and hello to all of you that are watching us on YouTube. Every webinar is cool because it's limited. And we hope this is some food for thought for all of you. Talking about gastronomy, we are feeding your brain, even though for some countries we're now close to lunchtime. So we hope this was, as Marcelo said, just the beginning. We want to reassure you that not only the Regional Department of Europe, but the whole of UNWTO is at your entire disposal. Should you have any question, any frustration, any need to share and need to find a greater platform of interaction, we're there for you. Member, non-member, everybody. The human factor works for us as well. And we're taking this all very, very seriously. So you will find all our contacts on our website, which is www.unwto.org. We are very active on social media, thanks to Marcelo's team. Please join us in our campaign, which is stay at home, but now we're very much focused on the hashtag travel tomorrow. We believe we will resume travel. We're very confident that this is definitely the most reactive industry that we have. So Quo Vadis tourism, where are we going? So see you for our next webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alessandra.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Stay safe, everybody.
See you soon.
Stay well. Thank you.